You know, trying to bring a fugitive back home from another country, it's not just some action movie chase scene. It's this incredibly complex, high-stakes legal chess match, played across borders and through all sorts of diplomatic tangles. So today, we're going to break down exactly how India gets into this fight, and maybe more importantly, why it's just so tough to get a win.
All right, here's the plan. We'll start with a real-life high-stakes case to see just how messy this can get. Then, we'll get into the actual rulebook, the laws behind it all. We'll talk about why this whole chase is so important in the first place, walk through the step-by-step process, and then we'll look at the big roadblocks that get in the way of justice. And finally, we'll explore what can be done to actually make things better.
Okay, so let's dive right in. And there's one name that really tells you everything you need to know about the challenges here, Mehul Choksi. His story, it's more than just about one guy on the run. It's really about the entire system being pushed to its absolute limits. And his case really boils down to this one huge question. How do you actually bring someone back home from halfway across the world to face justice? Let me tell you, the answer is this really complicated dance between law, diplomacy, and believe me, it is anything but simple. And to really get a sense of the stakes, just look at this number. 13,000 crore rupees. That's the estimated size of the PNB fraud case where Choksi is a key accused. I mean, this isn't some petty theft. This is a massive economic crime that sent shockwaves through the entire country's financial system. Now, here's where it gets interesting. As soon as the legal fight started, the conversation, it completely shifted. It wasn't about the fraud anymore. Suddenly, it was all about prison conditions in India. And to even get a foot in the door, India had to give this formal letter of assurance. Think of it like a binding promise to the other country, spelling out exactly how Choksi would be treated. And this right here, it shows you the first huge hurdle. The argument often has nothing to do with whether the person is guilty or not. And listen, we're not talking about some vague promises here. No. These assurances were incredibly specific. We're talking about which high-security barrack he'd be in, the exact square meters of his cell, a full plan for his medical care, even 24/7 CCTV. And this has become the new playbook, right? We've seen the same thing with Vijay Mallya, with Nirav Modi. So what's the big takeaway? It's that India doesn't just have to prove the crime happened. It has to prove its prisons are humane. Okay, so the Choksi case is a perfect real-world example of the drama. But now, let's kind of zoom out and look at the actual legal foundation for all of this. What's the official rulebook that controls every single one of these cases?
So what even is extradition, really? First thing to know, it's not the same as deportation. Not at all. Extradition is a very formal legal process between two countries to hand over a person so they can stand trial right back where the crime was supposedly committed.
And in India, the whole shebang is governed by one key piece of law, the Extradition Act of 1962. This is the master document, the one that pulls all the rules together and spells out exactly how these requests are supposed to be handled.
Now, any extradition, anywhere in the world, really boils down to three fundamental rules. Think of them as the non-negotiables. Rule number 1, dual criminality. This just means the act has to be a crime in both countries. Simple enough. Rule 2, the political offense exception. You generally can't be extradited for something that's purely political. And Rule 3, the principle of specialty. This is a big one. It means when someone is sent back, they can only be tried for the specific crime they were extradited for, nothing else. These are basically built-in safeguards.
And I just want to hammer this point home because it's so important not to mix these things up. Extradition, deportation, and exclusion are totally different things. So extradition is that formal legal process for a crime. Deportation, that's just immigration kicking someone out, maybe for an overstayed visa. And exclusion is even simpler. That's just being told, nope, you can't come in right at the border. 3 different tools for 3 very different jobs.
So how does India actually set up these partnerships with other countries? Well, it comes in 2 main flavors. You've got your formal, legally binding extradition treaties. India has those with over 40 countries. Think the US, the UK, the UAE, and then you have slightly less formal extradition arrangements, often with other Commonwealth nations. But here's the bottom line. Whether it's a treaty or an arrangement, you've got to have one of them in place. It's the absolute first step before you can even think about making a request.
All right, so we've covered the what and the how, but let's get to the really big question. Why? Why on earth does a country pour so much time, so much money, and so much diplomatic energy into chasing these people down? Well, because the stakes for the entire nation are just incredibly high.
So what's the real payoff for all this effort?
But first off, it's about upholding the rule of law. It sends a powerful message that you can't just run across a border and escape justice. Second, it's a huge deterrent. If there are no safe havens, people might think twice before committing massive crimes. Third, it's good for international relations. It shows we're all in this together fighting global crime. And finally, and this is a big one, it's often the only way to get stolen money back. So really, it's about justice, prevention, diplomacy, and yeah, a lot of money.
All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty now. We've talked about the big ideas, but what does the actual process look like? Let's walk through the step-by-step gauntlet, and just to be clear, this is for when another country wants to extradite someone from India.
So getting someone out of India is a real marathon, not a sprint. It all kicks off with a formal request through diplomatic channels. That lands on the desk of the Ministry of External Affairs, and it triggers a legal inquiry by a magistrate. Now, the magistrate's job is to check if there's what's called a prima facie case. Basically, is there enough evidence here to even move forward? If the answer is yes, a report goes to the central government and they make the final call. So you see, it's a whole system of checks and balances. Diplomats, judges, and the government all have a say.
So, on paper, that process sounds pretty straightforward, right? A, B, C. Done. Well, the reality is a whole lot messier. Success is never, ever guaranteed. So let's talk about the major roadblocks, the things that turn what should be a simple process into a brutal, years-long fight that often ends in failure.
So how good is India at actually getting this done? The numbers, well, they speak for themselves, and they're pretty grim. Just let this sink in. Over the past 20 years, for every 3 fugitives India has tried to bring back, only 1 has actually been successfully extradited. A 1 in 3 success rate. That tells you there are some massive systemic problems here. So what are they?
Well, there are a few huge hurdles that keep popping up. For one, fugitives and their high-priced lawyers will use every appeal possible in the foreign courts, dragging things out for years and years. The amount of evidence India needs to provide is also incredibly high. Then you've got some people trying to claim their crime was a political offense to get out of it. But the biggest weapon, the one that works time and again, is the one we already saw with Mehul Choksi, the argument about poor prison conditions in India.
Yep, this is the ace up their sleeve. The argument that can bring the entire process to a screeching halt. The lawyers stand up in a foreign court and paint this picture of Indian prisons. Overcrowded, unhygienic, violent, no proper medical care, basically a violation of fundamental human rights. And you know what? That argument lands. It really resonates with foreign judges, and it puts India in this terrible position of having to defend its entire prison system every single time.
Okay, so we've laid out all the problems, and it sounds pretty tough, but it's not a hopeless situation. So what's the path forward? What can actually be done? Let's talk about how India could potentially turn that 1 in 3 success rate around and forge a better blueprint for the future.
Most experts seem to agree on a 4-point plan. First up, you've got to modernize the law. The 1962 Act needs an update for 21st century crimes like cyber fraud. Second, and this is the big one, systematic prison reforms. You have to proactively upgrade the prisons to meet global standards. That takes their #1 argument right off the table. Third, you need stronger diplomacy to get other countries on your side. And finally, our investigative agencies need better training to build absolutely rock-solid cases, the kind of evidence-packed files that a foreign judge simply can't poke holes in.
And look, to be fair, some important steps have already been taken. A great example is the Fugitive Economic Offences Act from 2018. This is a game changer because it lets the authorities go after a fugitive's assets and confiscate them, even without a conviction. It hits these guys where it really hurts, right in the wallet. It's a smart move from just chasing people to actively taking away their ill-gotten gains.
Which really brings us back to the big final question, doesn't it? India is definitely making moves, updating laws, talking to other countries, building better cases, but is it all going to be enough? Will these reforms finally be enough to close that gap between justice waiting back home and the simple fact of geography that lets these fugitives hide? That, right there, is the ultimate challenge in this never-ending, high-stakes global chase.